As Charlie pointed out, it is a tale of two political parties. You have infighting in the Democratic Party and a historic split, which really needs to be resolved within the next 3 or 4 days. I said that last week. It really needs to be resolved in the last 3 or 4 days.
This is the worst.
This has got to come to an end. There's a Jerry Clower story and a joke that I won't retell here for the benefit of people that did not grow up in the Redneck Riviera. But there's also not only the specter of the most united Republican Party in 20 years, and they really are. That's what Republicans, when they look at this convention, they're not looking at whether the speech was rambling or whether it was said this or whether it said that.
They're winning.
They're looking at the fact they're winning. The lead's getting bigger. They're more united than ever. And I will say, I was talking to a good Republican friend who was at the convention yesterday that I've known for years from Florida, and we were just talking about Bob Dole. In 1996, we went to the convention knowing in 1996 that Bob Dole was going to lose. Everybody knew Bob Dole was going to lose. We knew it. But it was Bob Dole's time. And the party had gotten behind Bob Dole. Nobody was going to push him out of the race, even though we knew he was going to lose. Here we are, 2024, things are far different because Democrats believe that the stakes are so much bigger, that the stakes are existential. So that's what we're looking at, a very united, the most united Republican Party, again, in 20 years, and the most divided Democratic Party since 1968.
No question. It is a total split screen. And Democrats have made clear they think this is perhaps the most important election in our nation's history, that the stakes are that high. I certainly heard from some Democrats in recent days, some who want President Biden to step aside, who say, look, if the stakes are that high, we can't take this chance. Others, though, point to President Biden as the one man who's beaten Donald Trump before and say, look, he has a chance to make a comeback and do it again. But you're right, though, about the confidence the last 4 days in Milwaukee. This is a Republican Party that not only thinks that Donald Trump's going to win, they think they're going to take back the Senate. They think they're going to take the House. They think they'll have complete control. They'll be added a couple more Supreme Court seats. They feel like they could reshape American politics here. Now, we should know, we've heard that before from both parties in different cycles, and that doesn't end up happening or lasting. But that's just a snapshot right now of where things are. And Rev, we should also note that the one only bit of worry that we heard from Republicans in Milwaukee the last couple of days would be if Joe Biden were replaced atop the ticket. They feel like they can beat Biden. They've geared this whole campaign to beating Biden. They're a little anxious if it ends up being somebody else, whether it's the vice president or another candidate. But I wanted to make sure you had a chance. Give us your thoughts from what you heard from Donald Trump last night.
I think it was very interesting that he advertised it as this unity, even had the reel where he had his photos. He even had a photo with me and him up there last night, even though he attacks me with every name that he could think of. But then he didn't live up to the billing. It's almost like he advertised that it's going to be somebody singing a certain song and they never sing it, because he went right back into his old Donald Trump kind of performance against immigration, against those things that we know are divisive and in many ways coded language. But the other thing was missing was the fire. I really think people are not talking enough about how flat he was. The fiery Donald Trump was gone last night. And we're all asking whether or not there's been a diminished Joe Biden. I saw a diminished Donald Trump last night. I was expecting a Donald Trump that was full of vigor, full of fire. I'm back, fight, fight, fight. He used the words, but the whole fire was not there. And for those on the Democratic side that are saying, yes, this is consequential, and it definitely is, this is a very important election, and it is. Let's remember, it was in 2020, Joe Biden beat a sitting president. a sitting president. He didn't just win an election. He beat a sitting president. And to act like we're dismissing that for a alternative that is not spelled out. Because what I've said to people is, all right, if you want me to join the move Biden out, which I'm not, then what are we going to do? Well, we need to figure that out. Well, that's not good enough for me. Figure it out as we go when we have this much at stake.
Later?
I mean, we're going to figure it out whether we're going to have an open convention or go with Kamala Harris. You want me to participate in that kind of chicanery? We need to be definitive, or we need to move forward. And I think that it is insulting to Democratic voters to say that we're going to ad-lib our way into a consequential election.
Yeah. A house divided.
That was well put.
A house divided against itself can't stand.
That's the problem right there.
So the Democrats, as we said last week here, need to figure this out remarkably quick. Willie, looking at Donald Trump last night as speaking, it's hard for any of us to imagine escaping an assassination attempt and then moving forward and going at a breakneck pace. And so that's what he did. It is going to be hard. It's going to be. I think it's going to take a couple of weeks to figure out exactly where Donald Trump is. We've heard a lot of people as far as when all of the adrenaline crashes from surviving that assassination attempt. It's going to be interesting to see what this campaign looks like, because he has been operating at one speed from the first time he went down that escalator. And I know that his campaign wants him to sort of soften the tone, wants him to reach out, wants him to turn that 46% ceiling into a 47%, 48 ceiling. This is what the people that are running his campaign want him to do, and this is what he said he was going to do. We see last night, though, if you've been giving the same speech for about 8-9 years, it's hard to switch it like that. So we will see whether they're able to execute over the next couple of weeks and do what the campaign says they want Donald Trump to do.
Yeah, you saw that solemn tone, and understandably so, at the beginning as he recounted in great detail in the moving moment where he had Corey Compratori, the volunteer firefighter's jacket and a helmet there. So you understand the man less than a week ago survived an assassination attempt. So you understand the tone there, of course. But after that, it did feel like, and you saw this, by the way, rippling through the crowd, which we see at rallies, when it hits an hour or so, the crowd starts to get a little restless. Wonder where we're going with this. So for all the talk of unity, after about 20-25 minutes, it felt like another Donald Trump rally in tone and rhetoric and the arguments and the lies that he was telling and all the things that we have been accustomed to hearing. So that was a scripted speech. So if the campaign is trying to get him to just to soften the tone and get him to the middle a little bit more on some things. You'll notice he did not mention abortion last night. That's obviously by design. That's a bad issue for him if he's looking to win a general election. We didn't hear about that. But if the idea was unity and a softer tone, that's a scripted speech in a teleprompter. Some of it, obviously, he deviates. But it wasn't, beyond the first 20 minutes, it wasn't terribly kinder, gentler Donald Trump, frankly. And Michael Schmidt, I wonder how that last speech, Donald Trump, the last moment of that long convention this week that was by most measures successful for Republicans, I wonder how that impacts any thinking inside the Biden campaign. That is to say, the reminder of who Donald Trump is, despite what we've seen from the last week, that this is the guy that they still feel like, despite everything, despite the president's age, despite the debate, despite the poll numbers that are slipping in battleground states, they still believe in their hearts that they can beat Donald Trump. I wonder if that reminder last night impacts their thinking at all.
My guess is that last night just reinforces to them the crisis that they believe they have on their hands, that the Democratic Party is running against someone who, if he comes in, will act like an authoritarian, has people around him that are essentially putting plans together to not just bring forward his agenda, but bring it forward in a way that we certainly didn't see in the first term, whether that is using the Justice Department in different ways, whether that's on immigration. And I think that's why we're in the situation, the standoff that we're in, where you have the president and his party essentially in this standoff. And I think that if you're a Democrat and you were watching that and you saw that he picked J.D. Vance, you see Trump as someone who thinks he's really in a position of power. They did build this campaign to try and beat Biden, and they have done a substantial amount of damage to Biden over the past several months. Biden did damage to himself, obviously, at the debate, and now Biden faces an existential political crisis from his own party. And I can only imagine that Democrats will just continue to keep up the drumbeat that they have over the past few days as they see this election as existential. And it's been it's an unusual story to cover. We often don't get a chance to cover questions of acuity and questions of age. They don't come up in such a fashion like this. And there's an unusualness to that. But it has been, fascinating and dramatic to watch.
Hey there, MSNBC fans. I'm Luke Russert, and be sure to join me, Rachel Maddow, Jen Psaki, Lawrence O'Donnell, Steve Kornacki, Joy Reid, and many more September 7th in Brooklyn, MSNBC Live Democracy 2024. Click on the link for ticket information. We will see you there.